Hi, okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the second expansion for Lost Ruins of Arnak, the Mission Expedition. So, there's a whole bunch of stuff laid out here. Basically, everything is in the box, but what you're seeing here is 95% of it can be used in a multiplayer game. So we've had some questions about, like, is it a campaign, isn't it? It is that, but also pretty much everything here, except for very few things, can be used in a regular game. You just shuffle it in, and you can mix and match with the regular past expansion and also with the base game. But one of the things, I'll talk about what this does here, but one of the things I'm really excited about is the fact that this expansion adds a 6-chapter story campaign that can be played with 1 or 2 players. It's a co-op thing, so you can either play it solo or play it cooperatively with a second player. What it does is basically has an overarching storyline that goes across 6 kind of super challenging scenarios that use the board in different ways. Like for one example, here's an example of one of the new research tracks. It's double-sided. They're thematically tied to the expansion, but they also can be used as a regular one too. In one of the missions, you have a rising water scenario, so you have to keep your research stuff ahead of the rising water that goes every round. It'll go up a few things, so it's like you have to make sure you stay ahead of that, or you lose the scenario instantly, which is an example of like not easy. Meanwhile, you're also doing other stuff on the board, and if you're playing cooperatively, you have to keep both players' stuff above. Somewhere midway, you also will rescue some survivors, and you have to keep them above as well. So it's like that's one of the more crazy, challenging ones. But they thematically change up the way the board works in some really fun ways. So also to demonstrate that this thing that's cool, this is a gate, so when someone goes through, they pay one thing and it switches, so it's always shifting back and forth. So as someone goes through, it'll change what the things you have to do to pay for it. But the campaign has 6 chapters. It takes about like roughly an hour to play each one. The setup's not too bad. One of the things that I think is interesting about that is that each chapter has its own actual story stuff, but it has its own secondary sort of events deck. So these decks are shuffled randomly, and when you would actually end up having an event triggered, you'll draw a card, and it gives you basically a little bit of flavor text and some artwork. But you've got 2 choices. You can choose this. The first one can give you an instant resource bonus. So you get whatever's on the card, or you can take the second option and save the card and use it later on when you actually want to use it separately. So you can hold on to it and get like a later bonus, basically that you trigger manually. In the campaign also, depending which option you choose, you're going to have these little secondary symbols in the corner. Those get filled in on the second, it's like a metagame element. So as you're making choices, it'll cross symbols off, you'll go down these tracks. When you hit these certain numbers at the end of that chapter, you'll unlock bonus story and bonus cards that are kind of like cool little side tangents, and you use the extra cards, you'll get those in the rest of the game. So it's sort of like, it's not legacy per se, it's like you're just unlocking cool stuff, and you can't really do it all in one run of the campaign, so it adds some replay, which is nice, but also makes your decisions weightier, because you're like, cool, you're like, I really want this or that, but like maybe I really want this symbol, so I'm going to go with this for now instead. So it helps you kind of choose what you're doing. And a lot of these cards have a lot of different stuff they're doing on them. You get lots of different bonuses. So we try to add some like fun flavor text and scenarios, and they thematically align to the actual chapter they're in. But you can also use them in the main game by using these adapter tiles. So just shuffle these in, and then you'll actually get to like manually trigger these in a multiplayer game. So they can be used either or, but they are thematically tied to the 6 chapters of the campaign as well. When you're playing the chapters of the campaign, each chapter will have its own like main achievement you have to get to win the scenario. There's also lost conditions, so they'll be like if you get caught by the water, if you fail to do a thing in a certain amount of time frame. In addition to that, you have 3 bonus objectives that you may optionally try to complete. They're very cool and thematically tied to what's happening in the board layouts. But if you achieve them, you get bonus cards that help you out later on the game. Or, but also by going for them, it makes the game even harder. So if you want to just play kind of like a first pass, easy. Well, I don't say easy because you can still lose. I've played a bunch of chapters and they're not easy to beat. You can just go for the main option. But if you want to kind of maybe push your luck and try to get some more benefits, you can make the game a little bit harder by trying to like go for everything. So if you can complete everything, it's kind of a hard mode. So it is a lot of replayability because each chapter has story. Once you kind of hear the story, the whole arc of the story, you can go back and replay them as like one-off challenges. When you're playing cooperatively, you both also each get a token that's like this little pigeon. So pigeons lets you once per turn or once per round pass resources to their player, and then they exhaust and they get tired and take a nap for the rest of the round, which is really cute. Then the problem is they refresh the next round, but if you don't send them back and forth, like if you send your pigeons out and no one got sent back, then you can't send more. So we encourage you to keep working together. The game when you play co-op, it's very interesting because you actually really have to think and kind of figure out like what you're doing, because it gets very strategically intense as different scenarios push you in different ways. So that's sort of the campaign element. Let's kind of talk about some of the other content. So the other thing is that in the previous expansion, we got 6 new leaders that each had sort of asymmetrical powers and focus on different areas of the game. This introduces 2 new leaders that are they're sort of like very customizable in their play styles. Like, it's not that they don't really focus in one area so much as they give you different choices to make and styles of play. So with the mechanic, she starts off with all these cog tokens. You'll shuffle them up, and you'll basically pick 2 at the start of the game, and you choose which one you want to keep and which one you get rid of. So let's say I want to keep this one. I'll slot it into my machine. So this machine rotates, and that's sort of her main mechanic.
Satisfying.
Yeah. So you'll discard whatever you don't use. So over the course of the game, you're making choices of what to keep, what to get rid of, and out of numerous rounds, you'll get more to fill out your wheel with. So by the end of the game, you're gonna have a complete wheel. So her abilities, and she gets a monkey helper mid-game too. So the monkey can help you spin your wheel more. And you also have room for 2 regular assistants. But all of her cards are basically focused on using the wheel to spin to get more effect. So you're customizing your wheel, and then you get the ability to spin it more and more. So if you can thin your deck towards the later part of the game, you can spin a bunch and then spin a bunch, which is cool. So when you spin the wheel, you do this. It's 90 degrees. You spin it 90 degrees and clockwise. If it's a silver spin, which is like the basic version, you can choose either of these options on the silver track. If it's a more advanced gold spin, you can either use the gold option if you have one there, or you can get both. So you really can make some choices about how you want to build out your wheel over the course of the game as you get more of these things. So it lets you customize your play style to what you want to do, but also because you're making choices based on what you're presented with each time, it does feel very different each time you play the game. So she's very modular and kind of fun to experiment with. So that's the mechanic. I really like playing her. She's one of my favorite characters. Then this other character is kind of cool in the same way. His the journalist, so he's much focused on like writing stuff. And let me show you how this pops out. And I make a mess of everything. That's what I do the best. So at the beginning of the game, you'll take 4 of these double-sided article, magazine, newspaper tokens, and you pick which ones you want to use, or you can shuffle them randomly and just choose those. So when you've got your choices, you'll slot them into the game, his board, and that's basically what his abilities for that particular game. So it changes game to game too. It's also very modular. Then you take all these tokens and you place one of these article tokens on every site of the game on the board. When he travels to a location, he can spend 1 extra movement of a type he's used to write an article. So he'll take up the token, and you can either slot it and just leave it for later, or you can use it immediately by covering up one of these options and getting the thing you cover up. So that's the baseline of what that does. When you fill in all 4 of a particular thing, you then get to use the next one on the better option, because these are more powerful. If you make a row across for each time, you unlock a corresponding slot for items that don't eat up your victory points, so you get more options. So, excuse me, because he's very modular as well, he plays very differently each time you use him, much like the way she does. So the other thing, there's one last thing you can do. He's the only character that can have his tome on the research track one above his magnifying glass, which basically represents that he's like able to absorb and document knowledge faster once he uncovers things. So that's kind of cool because he actually ends up getting assistance a little bit faster. So that's the journalist, and so those are the 2 new leaders, and basically the rest of the game is just more tiles, there's more artifacts, and more items, and all basically you can shuffle all into the game and use it. And it's a lot of stuff in the expansion. It adds a lot and for different players, but it's a little mix of everything. So if you just want more Arnak, new leaders, you can use that in a lot of multiplayer games, or they can use it with the expansion, with the campaign. But for people who like story, who like replayability and challenges, and also solo and co-op, the campaign adds a whole new layer to basically what you experience already from Arnak. So yeah, that's the Missing Expedition. It's technically out now at Gen Con, although we're sold out. And it'll be reaching retail probably by early September or late August. So it's on its way here.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No problem.